Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield, talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donohue, and my co-host and creepitude, as always, is the amazing Sonia Mansfield. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend.
Hello, my friend. We are the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. Today, we are talking about a true crime that happened in San Diego in 1989, and it took over the country. There were
Yes, it did.
2 TV movies made about this with Meredith Baxter. And this woman was on the Oprah show. Like, this got so much attention at the time. So I just thought this could be kind of fun to talk about. We're going to be talking about Betty Broderick, the killing of her ex, Dan, and his second wife, Linda. But before we get there, just so you know, if this is your first time listening, we always end the show with somebody who is not a creep. So just to keep that in mind for you. Also, we're always looking for ideas for creeps and for non-creeps. So let's start with Facebook. We have a basic Facebook page, but that's where people go to complain about our language. This is your official warning that we use salty language in this program. Fuck, shit, damn. There you go. We're much more interactive in our private Facebook group. That's where the most interactive. They're trying on the Patreon page too. But it's so you type in What a Creep podcast group and ask to join, and just promise not to be an asshole. Come on in. And we have the water's fine. We talk about pop culture and news, and we're all there to help each other. It's a nice, safe space to hang out. We're on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at What a Creep Podcast. And then we have an old-timey email, whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like some stickers, and I am waiting for stickers to come in, but I did reorder some stickers. If you want some stickers, send me your address via that email, and I will get in touch with you and send that out to you wherever you are on the planet of Earth.
She will do it.
I will do it. If you're on Jupiter or Mars, I can't help you. But on this planet, my home planet, this is it.
My home planet.
My home planet. Sonia, you want to tell them about the website?
Yeah, go to whatacreeppodcast.com, and it's everything you want to know about the podcast, but we're afraid to ask. You should never be afraid to ask. But if you are, you can go there. You can open each of the links there, each of the episode links, and it expands into a blog post, and it's filled with our show notes because we source everything we do. We're not making this stuff up. We're listing all of the sources. If you're looking for a deeper dive on any of our creeps, fabulous place to start. We also have a link to our merch shop where you can get t-shirts and tote bags, face masks, all kinds of things. So do that. And we have a link to our Patreon. You want to tell people about that, Margot?
Yes, Patreon. We are in season 28 right now of this show. 28 seasons.
Hey.
The first 9 seasons are on that Patreon wall. Plus, we put out 2 bonus episodes every month. And that's those bonus episodes are Sonia and I talking about stuff that's happening in the news, more bite-sized creepage that we get into. And we also do that on video if you want to see what we look like when we're talking. It's pretty exciting for some people.
You can see our pusses.
You see our pusses talking about the news. So everybody that signs up there, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. You can also sign up for free because sometimes I put clips in there that help the show out. And I sometimes it's okay on Facebook. Sometimes it's not okay on Facebook, on Instagram,
Correct.
and TikTok. Like they all have every once in a while, they just have their rules. So I decided we'll always, something like that, we'll always put on our Patreon wall for free. So you can go check it out. You can see for yourself. So we got some good clips here today because the actual trials were televised. And Betty liked the television. The television loved Betty back in the 80s.
This story was everywhere. So
it's truly
there was a lot
everywhere.
to go through, I'm sure.
Yes. And it's so funny because speaking of TikTok, I posted a couple of videos on TikTok that I posted also on Facebook. And I have never had people leave long responses to a video I've posted on TikTok, except for this one. And I post a lot of shit on there, but people just digging down. And I'd say 90% of these people are on Team Betty. It's pretty miraculous how this very unlikable woman, everybody can relate to her. Like that, everybody, all these people completely are on her side. So it's interesting. This is a pretty good episode. I think we're going to have today.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about it.
Did you see the TV movies about Betty Broderick?
I saw them back in the day. I
Same.
did not rewatch them for this because I didn't want to be tainted before we talked about it, but I will probably watch them. But I will probably watch them after. Because
they're streaming on all the free apps like Tubi and stuff like that, and it's pretty spectacular. I mean, these are TV movies. They used to be very, very popular on television. They were the quality is actually quite good.
Yeah,
the writing, the acting, they have some great people there. I mean, it's Stephen Root is in this thing. The first one, he's got a role in there as one of Dan's friends that marries younger, and it's just got some great stuff in there. So anyway, people have thoughts about Betty Broderick. You just bring her up and people immediately will just start giving you their opinion. So
yeah, well, there's a lot to talk about, and I'll wait till we get into it. But yeah, there is a lot. I understand why people have thoughts and feelings about this case.
It was brought up a few years ago. USA had a limited series called Dirty John, and then they had the Dirty John one, and then they brought it back and they said Dirty John, Betty Broderick story with Amanda Peet, and that did really well. So this story, there's a lot here, and I can understand why. This is also like our society is very, very gradually starting to change from the patriarchal view that the fathers lead the family. They're the ones that earn the money and the moms take care of the homes. Like that's changing. You know, a lot of women are in the workforce now. Most homes have both parents working. But there was this woman, Betty Broderick was a 40-year-old woman who shot her husband. She was like 42 at the time. She kills her husband, her ex-husband, and his current wife in cold blood, like snuck into their home. And yet people were on Team Betty. And you're going to be like, why would anybody be on this woman's side? There's a lot to talk about here. So I'm psyched to get into this today. I know you and I have talked about it a little bit this week, but I didn't go deep into what we were going into today. And there's so much to go on. So are you ready, Sonia?
I'm super ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's get into it. Betty Broderick is a convicted murderer known for the killing of her ex-husband, Dan Broderick, and his second wife, Linda Colcana Broderick, in 1989. The case gained widespread media attention, including a memorable appearance on The Oprah Winfrey Show. Due to its dramatic elements of betrayal, divorce, and revenge, her crimes were the subject of 2 television movies starring Meredith Baxter, and also a USA Limited series starring Amanda Peet and Christian Slater as Dan. And he was actually a good Dan, I thought. Stephen Collins was actually Dan in the other ones that we were talking about. He was a former creep that we talked about this season or last season.
Find that episode. We did Stephen Collins and Jeffrey Jones together.
Yes. Sonia did a great job with that.
Thank you.
Has she ever taken responsibility for the pain she has pain she has caused? We will get into that with this episode. The trigger warnings are domestic violence, mentions of suicide, and murder. Sources for this episode: the LA Times, Wikipedia, of course, Netflix, A Woman Scorned, the Betty Broderick story, the Spotify podcast, It Was Simple, Vulture, CBS San Diego, Oprah's interview with Betty Broderick, Snapped, which was an Oxygen Channel show.
Oh, yeah, I know that. Show.
My friend Deb, who's probably listening to this right now. Hi, Deb. She loves that channel. That's like the first thing she checks every time she turns on the TV. She knows all those shows.
Yeah, they have Snapped is a whole series of like women that
killed their husbands.
Basically. Yes.
Yeah. There's a Woman Scorned. I said that. Good Housekeeping, Marie Claire, People Magazine, and the Killer Psyche podcast. So Betty Broderick, Elizabeth Ann Broderick, was born Elizabeth Ann Bisceglia or Bisceglia. It's Bisceglia. I'm saying it the Brooklyn way because she's from Brooklyn. Originally, she was born in Brooklyn, and she grew up in an Irish Catholic family. An Italian Catholic family, and she was raised. She was very, very pretty. I didn't realize about Betty. She was 5'10", and
Oh,
blonde
that's
and
tall.
very striking. Yeah, because people used to say she could have been a model. She's very, very pretty. So she grows up in this home where her parents, they always have like a maid and a housekeeper. They have money. So she's never had to do her own laundry. She didn't know how to have to learn how to cook. But basically her parents raised her like they went to country clubs. They made sure that she looked right, she wore the right clothes, that she knew how to talk to people at cocktail parties. And she would be somebody like you send her to college and she comes home with what do they call that? You
get your MS degree.
Your MS degree. Exactly.
Yeah. You go to college and you just get married.
You become a Ms.
Yes.
And you're all looking for that. So Betty grows up on the East Coast. She's studying to be a school teacher because she didn't know what she really wanted to do. And when she's 17 years old, she's a freshman. She goes to Notre Dame. She's invited to go to see a game at Notre Dame. She's going to college in the Bronx. And there she meets Dan Broderick. And Daniel is going there. He's getting his degree and then he's going to go to med school. And his whole thing is, I'm going to be a doctor one day. And he was obsessed with her when he met her. He talked about her all the time. He's like 4 years older than her. And she's, like I said, she's blonde. She's striking. You know, she's your ideal. If you're thinking of like the typical shiksa socialite wife, this is who you want. Like somebody who just looks great, knows how to have good conversations with people, can learn golf, can learn all the things, you know, to be social. And she thought, he's handsome and he wants to be a doctor and he loves me. And he was completely smitten with her. So
I'm looking at a picture of him. I'm like, he's a good looking guy.
He's actually handsome, but I think he's one of those annoying men that in their middle-aged years, they start to look really good. Like they hit it later on in life. I'm a bit of a late bloomer too, but he said his whole thing was he's actually very, very shy and very nerdy. And Betty was somebody that was very outgoing and vivacious. Right. So he saw somebody like, oh, she'll be great. I'll take the boss home and she'll talk to everybody and charm the pants off of them. Like, that's what he's thinking. So they get married in 1969. And Dan is going to medical school and within a year of them getting married, she gets pregnant. Betty will get pregnant, she says, at least 9 times during her marriage. And she's had 4 kids that lived. There was 2 that died during childbirth.
Oh my God.
And
that's awful.
And also there's one that died pretty soon after it was born. She's also had several miscarriages. She says they were Catholic, and my parents were Catholic too. And they weren't allowed to use birth control. I've told you this story before, but I'll tell you guys, my mother had 4 kids in 5.5 years. So she was eventually like, okay, this is done. I'm done. I want my waist back. I'm done with all this shit. So Dad goes, fine. She says, I want to get my tubes tied. My dad goes, fine. It's the mid-70s. She goes to her doctor. He's Catholic. He says, I need to talk to your husband before I can even consider doing this. So
that
my dad,
is bananas.
It's bananas
to me.
My mother's 25 years old, okay? Has 4 kids screaming. Okay, so my dad has to take the day off from work to go to see this guy. And he meets them. And then he says to my dad, do you understand if this happens, she can't have more babies? And my dad's like, do you understand we have 4 kids we could barely take care of right now? Like, she could do whatever she wants. It's her body.
Right.
And the doctor said, well, I'm Catholic and I won't do it. So you have to find somebody. So Mom is upset and crying. And she's going to pick us up from school. And one of her friends, her Jewish friends, comes over and says, what's going on? She explains. My mom tells her what's going on. She goes, no, you have to see my doctor because they'll take care of you. Like, this is bullshit. So, yeah, this is not that long ago, guys.
It's so bananas to me. It's like, well, we need to get permission.
And once he gave her permission, they still said no because they were open to talk him out of it. I mean, it's just exactly. Yeah. And it's worse now, but okay.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want her to take birth control, or that's what she says, that he's completely against it. So if she gets pregnant, it's God's will kind of thing. God's plan.
God's plan.
So it's the 70s and they're broke and it's 1970. They have a little baby. They can't even afford to have a crib. They can't afford to have a lot of the niceties you would want for a baby. So their first daughter, their oldest, Kimberly, she's basically was raised in a dresser drawer. Like, that was her crib.
I've heard this kind of story from multiple people about, like, they would pull out a drawer
Yeah.
and like fill it with blank, and like it was basically a makeshift crib. It was super like another friend of mine was pregnant and having a baby, and like she's like, I need to buy a crib, blah blah blah. And her mom's like, oh please, like for 6 months you slept in a dresser drawer. Like it's super, like that's a thing that people did.
Well, I'm
Like,
sure, and especially
you don't close the drawer, but
right.
like.
And you're thinking about, especially when you're having a baby, like you're buying stuff that's going to be obsolete for you anyway in a few months. Like they outgrow everything.
It's true.
And it's expensive and it takes up a lot of space and it's messy. I mean, babies are a lot. So Dan's going to medical school and she's taking care of this baby. And she gets pregnant the following year. And then she has her second daughter, Lee. Then she's had a couple of miscarriages and she had a baby that died at childbirth. And then she's had 2 more sons in the later 70s. By the time Dan is done with medical school, he surprises her by saying, guess what? Not only am I not practicing medicine, I want to go to law school. So we're going to go to Harvard because that's where I got accepted. So then he's in Harvard Law School. And he's going to be a lawyer that handles medical malpractice because he can see the writing on the wall. Like that's where the big money's going to be. That's coming up.
Okay.
So they go to Harvard. She has the 2 more babies while she's there. He graduates and then he gets a job in LA at a law office. So they move cross country. She leaves her family behind. You know, she goes with her 4 kids now with him to LA. And then he does well enough that he gets offered a job at a prestigious place in San Diego, which is like a couple hours south of LA.
Right.
On the West Coast.
And tell me if I'm remembering this correctly. When he was in law school, she did things like sell Tupperware.
Yes, that's what I was just going to get into.
Oh,
yes.
okay. Sorry.
No. You're good to bring that up. When he's going to law school, to med school, then law school, she is not only raising 4 kids and taking care of him, she's coming up with the money to survive because they can't afford a babysitter. They can't afford a crib. They can barely survive. So she sells Tupperware. She is a cleaner for people. She works at restaurants, to be a hostess. Excuse me.
She's doing all of these things to keep supporting him in his dream financially and taking care of all these babies. That's a lot.
Which is the contract. It's a social contract that people come up with, especially in the 1970s. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, sure, there's second wave feminism, but a lot of women still just want to get married and have a baby. And it's still indoctrinated in people like that's the natural order of things. Yes. With women, you're supposed to have a career and a family at the same time.
Yeah.
But here
she is. You support him in his dream.
His dream. Then he makes a shitload of money, and then you can just eat bonbons and have like people take care of you. That's supposed to be the trade.
Yeah.
I'm giving you my youth. I'm giving you my beauty. I'm giving you my vivacious personality. I'm giving you 4 kids that you could brag about. It's not, I mean, it's not like, people love to go after women for being gold diggers or going after gold diggers. And I'm saying I've come to believe that there's really no such thing because if you're marrying someone just because they're gorgeous and young, that's worth something. That's a currency.
Correct. So it is. Absolutely.
It absolutely is. And it's an exchange of goods as far as I'm concerned. So that's how she's approaching it. So they go to LA and then he gets this job offer in San Diego and she still has to work at the Black Angus. Remember those restaurants, the Black Angus?
Oh my God. Yeah. The Square Cow Fun Bar.
Yes. So she's a hostess at a Black Angus and she's babysitting for money. She's got 4 kids.
Yeah.
She's 30 years old. Her husband is working at a law office in San Diego in La Jolla, which is like this really hoity-toity area. And she's still having to do all this in order for them to make ends meet. He finally starts to make enough money, and he's actually a huge rising star in the attorney community in Southern California. Right. And in San Diego, Dan is known for being constantly, people talk about him. He is super tough. He's super thorough. He's courageous. He doesn't sweat. He never looks like he's nervous, and he gets all the money that he's asking for. And they said, if you meet him in person and he's very shy to get to know, but once you get to know him, he's a pretty cool guy. But you don't want to be an enemy of his, and you don't want to meet him in court because he's just a shark. That's his total personality. He's there to win. So he finally starts to make some money. And then they start buying, they upgrade their home in La Jolla. And these homes in La Jolla now sell for like $10 million a piece. I mean, my friend Margot from Book versus
Dang.
Movie lives in San Diego, but she lives in San Diego proper. La Jolla is like outside of it by the water.
Right.
And so I was asking Margot about all this, and like, some of the kids didn't go to the same high school. Margot went to a Catholic high school, but they went to the regular high schools. There's a lot of famous people. Tucker Carlson's from this part of the country. The guys from Rat, the band Rat, are from La Jolla. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's like a lot of Raquel Welch went to school there.
It's like LA adjacent.
It is
right?
LA adjacent. So there's a lot of entertainment people.
Yeah, so there's entertainment people that want to live by the water and they are attracted to that sunshine and
they don't want to be in LA.
Yeah,
because that's its own thing. It's one industry town and whatever. So Dan now has 4 kids, a beautiful wife, same as it ever was. He's living in this house. He's making a lot of money. They belong to 2 country clubs.
2? Why do you need to be in 2?
They have to be in 2.
Isn't 1 enough?
He's constantly networking. And by networking,
okay.
I mean he's constantly drinking with friends until late at night, getting clients. He's all about building his client base. He's all about making connections with people. He's all about looking for that future, court case that he's going to be in charge of. So he's extremely interested in that. And Betty is a talking machine. She's very, very outgoing. So it works out. They're a good team when it comes to that. Now, they say later there were always problems in their marriage because he says, because Betty just nags me and Betty just gives me a hard time. And she's like, well, he's just always busy and he's never home. And so I'm just going to give you my opinion. It's not based on anything remarkable. I don't have a degree in psychology or anything, but these are 2 very narcissistic people. And sometimes narcissists attract one another and then they kill each other. I mean, I'm saying that metaphorically, but also literally. These are 2 people that think they are the right one and the other one needs to get in line. That's how they see each other.
Mm-hmm.
They're adversaries. They're not a team.
Right. They look like a team from the outside.
From the outside, you do. But when you're on the inside, and the kids have said later, they were fighting all the time. And mom, constantly was, how come you're not home? He was never coming home at a decent hour. He's always out. He had several DUIs because he'd be out drinking so much with other people. It was a whole lifestyle for him.
Well, and it's interesting because when we were looking to, not everybody, I'm not speaking for everybody, but a lot of people, when they're looking for their partner, we look for things that we think will complement each other. So you said he's very shy and all those things, which is probably why he was drawn to her because she is more outgoing.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we'll balance each other out. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it's the thing you grow to hate.
Because they're 2 different motivations.
Because exactly, you're super different.
You're different. You look at things differently. You see things differently. You approach things differently. You have different expectations for the outcomes.
Yes.
So there's gonna be that problem.
Yes.
And Betty is not one to settle down. Betty is like the kind of person, she's not going to just stay home and raise kids and do the laundry stuff. She's going to be like, I'm raising kids. I've been doing laundry all day. I've been doing this. She's always announcing what she's doing.
She wasn't suffering in silence.
No, she was not suffering in silence.
Nor does she have to.
No, does she have.
I'm not suggesting.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But Dan is like, hey, I'm giving you, I'm making, he got to the point where he was making $1 million a year, which in 1984 is a lot of money. If you're not a movie star or something, that's rich. That shit is rich. So he's making more money. She, first of all, of course, not only did she work all those jobs to pay for his schooling and to pay that off, but also she helped him with, the look that he should have, the suits he should wear, what's the kind of decorations his office should look like, what should people have when they go in there. He was at a very successful agency and then he branched out on his own. And so his whole thing was like, look, for the next 2 years, I'm just going to be looking for clients. I'm just going to be working, just so you know. And Betty, that was like, no, I want you home by 6 for dinner. It's not going to happen. They're constant, like I said, they're just constantly. Somewhere around 1983, the 2 of them are attending a party at the country club. And she overhears Dan and he's talking about somebody new at the office named Linda. And he's saying, oh my God, she's so beautiful. And he doesn't realize his wife could overhear it. And Betty, once again, she's beautiful. Like I said, tall, blonde, like she's the ideal, like California sunny chick. And she said she's got all of her friends, like they were all good looking. It's California. Everyone's good looking. Like she had all these friends that were like,
that's right, we are. Thank you.
Well, yeah. I mean, I went to school in California. Trust me. That was a shock for this pale kid from the East Coast to show up in a sea of blondes. They're all tan and
so many blondes.
And smell like coconut, and they're just so like sunny and fun. And
California girls.
It's exactly
undeniable.
It's exactly it. I mean, there is a thing. And she had a friend that she said that was like a Miss USA or something. She gets out of the shower, she's gorgeous. Like she doesn't need any makeup. Dan's never said anything. But she said this person he described as beautiful, which is a word you have to be like, huh.
Yeah, red flag.
Red flag. And then he's working a lot, and he has a staff, but he needs to she's like getting on his case to find a partner with somebody, but he doesn't want that. He wants his own thing. So Linda was born in 1962. So Dan was born in 44. Betty was born in 1947. Linda was born in 1962. So she's about 15 years younger than Dan. She's around 21 when she starts to work in San Diego. Before this, she was raised in Salt Lake City, but she was raised in a Catholic family, not a Mormon family. But she was raised around religious people. So she didn't go to college because in her family, their whole thing was like, you're beautiful, you're a woman, find yourself a nice husband, find yourself a guy that makes a good living, you won't have to worry about anything. She was raised the same way. But she's got that same game plan, but she's 15 years younger. So she was living in Atlanta, and she was a Delta Airlines hostess. And apparently Linda she took a flight to go skiing with a bunch of friends, which is, one of the perks of being an air stewardess is like you could have free flights. But the thing is that you have to behave yourself on the free flight. You can't draw any attention to yourself. You have to be. And apparently she liked to drink and she liked to party. And there was a guy that she was skiing with, and they had a good time, and they were back on the plane making out and being rowdy, and she gets fired. And
can't do that.
Can't do that. And I don't know how she meets this guy, but she is dating a guy that works for the San Diego Union Tribune as a political cartoonist. I don't know how these people meet, but she moves to San Diego to be near him. Okay. So she's dating this guy, and she's in San Diego because she wanted to go where the sunshine is. She didn't want to go back to Utah. And so she's looking for a gig, and she gets a temp gig working at Dan's office. And they say, so what's your deal? And she goes, oh, I was a flight attendant and I went to high school. I'm 21. What else do you want to know? And they're like, okay, well,
you're hired.
You're hired. She doesn't know how to type.
Submit your headshot.
Submit your headshot. Exactly. She does. And everybody keeps talking about this over and over again. She doesn't know how to type. She doesn't. She didn't go to law school. She was never an executive assistant. She was never a secretary or an executive assistant to anybody.
Wow.
She was a partying stewardess. And then flight attendant, excuse me. And then we'll call flight attendants now. And then she's in San Diego, and she's temping for this guy, but she's gorgeous. And Dan notices her. So Dan starts working with her. And then Linda gets promoted. She gets hired, $30,000 a year, which is like 1981, 82. That's not bad scratch.
Right.
She's hired there. She gets her own office, and she's Dan's assistant. So there were people that were doing the job of his assistant before, and he's moved them to do other things, but she gets the office. She gets more money. She doesn't have to type.
That's
she doesn't
not
have to answer
suspicious.
the phone. Right. She doesn't have to answer the phones.
So subtle.
No filing, no copying. Like, what is this chick doing all day?
Totally just sits at her desk filing her nails, like, la, 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 la.
I'm sure he gave her stuff to do, and I'm not saying, but it's suspicious. And it was enough that the people who work for Dan resented it. They're like, who's this, frankly, bimbo? That's a thing people would say at the time. But who is this person? Who are these people? That just show this blonde shows up, and she's all of a sudden my boss, and she's the boss is like, and they go to lunch together a lot, and there's lots of meetings in his office with the door closed, and so Betty is curious, what's going on over there, and she's talking to somebody that works there that works for Dan, and she could tell by talking to this woman that she's frustrated because Dan hired somebody, like 10 or 15 years younger than she was. And all of a sudden she's treated like she's got potential. She's going to be a star. Like, okay.
Yeah.
So she's saying to Betty, look, I don't know what's going on, but I think it would be a good idea for you to show up more often downtown. You need to become more present like you were at his first job when he worked at the big agency. That's what you need to do here because you're not doing that enough. So Betty's like, good point. Okay. So it's Dan's 39th birthday. So it's like 1983. And it's late November is his birthday. And so she shows up at the office like around 11 o'clock and she brings champagne and some champagne flutes. And she's like, she's going to celebrate his birthday. We're going to do this. We're going to go to lunch and then we're going to like take the day off. She's that's the whole thing. She gets herself all dolled up and she goes to the office and she sees balloons everywhere and happy birthday signs everywhere. And Dan is not the kind of guy that would do that.
Right.
So she's all of a sudden, she's suspicious. She's like, oh, we had a party here, like in the middle of the day? And they're like, yeah. And he went to lunch with Linda, but they should be back any minute. So Betty's like, all right, I'll wait. So she goes in Dan's office and she sits there. Once again, there's balloons and cards and everything everywhere and a half-eat piece of cake. She stays till 5 o'clock. Dan never comes back with Linda.
Not good.
It's not good. So Dan, so by the time he does get home, and he gets home late, and it's his birthday. So like his own kids had a birthday cake and stuff ready for him.
Right.
Like they wanted him to have dinner with their house and like they thought they were going to all hang together. Now, he comes home and he's tired because he's been out with Linda all day. And he says, oh, we were doing depositions in the afternoon. Like we went to lunch and then we did depositions, not at the office. We went someplace else to do depositions and then we left. And Betty's like, this is some bullshit here. So Betty says, dude, you need to fire her. I'm giving you a month. You got to get rid of her.
Yeah.
Dan doesn't do it.
Of course not.
And the people are Betty's like now talking about this to her friends at the country club. Like she calls this Linda the C word. And she's very suspicious.
I would also call her the C word.
I would too, because if you're doing that to my husband, no, you're not.
Yeah.
We're not friends. Like, let's just be clear.
Correct.
We're not friends anymore. This is personal now. You're going.
Yeah.
You're coming for me.
Yeah. By the way, I'm not suggesting that like Linda is to blame here. Dan is to blame. He's
Dan's
the one
to blame. He's the grown up.
But also,
I mean, yeah.
I don't have a lot of love for women who sleep with married men.
No, I mean, I would say, look, she's 21, 22 years old. It's pretty immature.
You make fucking bad choices.
You make very bad choices in your 20s. That's the whole thing.
Very bad choices.
Me too.
So,
I did things I wish I hadn't done with people I would never normally go near.
Yes.
I mean, there's lots of stuff you do, and you don't have the best.
True, but the responsibility is on him.
He's the married one.
Yes.
He's the one that broke his vows.
Yes.
So this is 1983, around November. This is when the tension starts going up, and they buy a house in La Jolla, and then the house has all kinds of issues. So the house catches on fire, and so they have to get it. They were at a house. It catches fire. They take that money, the insurance money from that, and they invest it in a really nice property in La Jolla. So they're in La Jolla for a little bit, and then all of a sudden they're having an issue with rodents. We were talking about rats and stuff. They have an issue with rats at the home and other things. So the home needs to be completely have the base of the home. Everything has to be fixed. There's something wrong with it doesn't have good bones. They have to fix the bones of the house. That's what they have to do. So they have this house, this gorgeous house that nobody's staying in because it's got to be rebuilt. So they're in a smaller home. So he's got 2 rents that he's paying.
Yes.
So he's already kind of getting agita over this, like over these 2 things. And so Betty now is like super mom. She doesn't have to work anymore, but she's also made it her thing. Like, I'm going to be the coach for the soccer team, and I'm going to be at the Cub Scouts, the Brownie
4
Scouts.
Kids is a lot of work.
It's a shitload of work. I don't know how my mother did it. And my mom worked full time. I don't know how any of this got done. I mean, but
Dude, I only have 1, and I don't understand how people do it. Like,
right. And you only have them half the time because you split the time.
Exactly. I'm like, it's so much work to have multiple kids.
She doesn't have a cell phone. Like all the communicating that you have to do has to be done on the fly. Like it's just, it's a pain in the ass. She's raising these kids, so she's like making sure they're dressed properly, they look great, they know how to ski, they know how to be social, they're popular. That's all those things that she really cares about. So she's really into their soccer, and she's into all their interests and their musical lessons and all this shit. And she's trying to explain this to Dan, like, I'm doing this all day. Because he's constantly making cracks like, you're having it easy now. Like, you don't have to work anymore. He thinks that she's like eating bonbons and
it's the Peg Bundy thing where it's like, she's just sitting around like
smoking cigarettes and like
eating
bonbons
and watching
Oprah.
Yeah, watching her soap operas. It's like,
and
no.
And she's saying, or also like, I do stuff because she also, it's very important. Appearances are very important to the both of them. They're both very vain.
Right.
And so it's important to them to like look right. And so that means she has to wear certain things, get her hair done a certain way, always have her makeup done. There's certain things she does because she's constantly running into his people. By this point in time, by the way, Dan soon becomes the president of the San Diego Bar Association. Like he's really well known in San Diego.
Yeah.
And he's a big deal. And he's handsome. He's in his 40s. He's handsome. He's successful. He's super smart. He's super scary in the courtroom. Like, everybody knows who Dan is.
Yeah.
And then who Betty is. She's his wife. She's bubbly and fun, and she's outgoing. Everybody talks about how funny she is, and that she's just like, just got like a kind of roller, she's just always this ball of motion, like everywhere she went.
Right.
And then she's going through this thing with Dan. She's starting to feel like he's not coming home. He's not paying attention. They're arguing a lot. He's saying things like, well, I don't want to go home because if I come home, we're just going to argue. Like they're making all these excuses up. Eventually, it happens that Dan and Linda move in together. Dan and Betty break up. He wants a divorce. He wants to split up. So then Betty moves into their old. So there's an old house that they have, a really fancy one, and Dan and Linda are going to stay there. And then Betty has a home, and then they have another home that they're going to sell. So because it's like 3 mortgages that he's paying off, like 2 mortgages and a rent that he's paying off because of this. So he's like, the house that they had to fix up, he says to Betty, I'll sleep on the floor. I don't give a shit. I'm just going to live at that house. You guys stay here. She says, fine. So at first, he's just going to stay at that house. And he has no furniture because they had to take it out to like do everything. So he's sleeping on the floor, and he's figuring out like, oh, wow, I don't have dishes. I don't know how to do anything. I'm alone. I don't know how to do anything. And so when he has the kids stay with him half the time, they're teaching him like, this is how you cook. This is what we need for the house, all these things.
She did all that.
She did all that.
Yeah,
so
domestic stuff.
He now is doing that. And he hires a housekeeper, and he hires somebody to take care of things. So now when the kids come over, Betty is always talking about Dan, and she's always complaining about their dad and always like upset. Dan never talks about their mother. Dan always just wants to talk about them. So the kids start really liking Dan more because he's the fun parent. He's not the nagging parent.
Yeah. Yeah, this is super common.
Very common.
Where especially where the split isn't mutual.
Right.
But there's definitely, I would say, the stereotype of like fun dad.
Yeah.
No response. Like, he's not the one enforcing rules. She probably has them all week. So they're going to school while they're with her. And it's like, you will do your homework and there's the routine and all that stuff. And then when they see their dad on the weekend, it's like, and then we went to Disneyland and then we did this and we did that.
We had a pizza party in the living room because we had no furniture. We made it really fun.
Yeah,
and Dad
it's
loved
so
it.
Fun. And he lets us do whatever we want. And I stayed up all night and ate pixie sticks. And
exactly. And had a sugar high. And we ran all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. And mom's a buzzkill.
Right. So Betty's like upset that their marriage is breaking up. She's upset because she's getting older. She's upset because she's starting to gain weight. And it could be just perimenopausal stuff happening.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of stresses that are happening to her. So the kids are finding Dan more fun. So Betty gets upset when she gets in an argument with one of her kids. She's like, fine, you like your dad so much? You can live with him. And she'll throw a bunch of shit in a suitcase and then drop him off at Dan's house. Dan doesn't know they're going to be there. So Dan comes home from work around 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and there's a kid sitting on the front lawn, like on the front steps with their bag. And they're like, hey, Dad, Mom says I'm living with you now. And she does this with every kid. There's
Wow.
4 of them. And she just one by one starts
Oh my
dropping them
God,
off
one
at
at a
Dan's.
Wow. Okay.
And at first, Dan was like, and the kids say this. At first, he was overwhelmed and he didn't know what he was short with them. And he was like, oh, you're in my space. I don't know what I'm doing. But they said eventually he figured it out. And he outsourced it. He got a housekeeper. He got somebody to help cook a few times a week. But that's what you should do if you have money. Like why kill yourself?
You fucking make it work.
Make it work. And he was making it work. And he and Linda were starting to go out. So now that he's separated, he can now say, oh, Linda and I discovered that we, we're really into each other.
Right.
Now, I wonder. Yeah, it's
after I split up from my wife, we realized that we have feelings for each other. Sure.
Yeah. Nobody ever buys that.
Sure, Jan.
And yeah. And so Dan is now with Linda. And this just sets her off. She's lost her kids. She's lost her husband. So she's thinking to herself, what's going on with my life now? And they work out a plan where Dan's going to pay her $9,000 a month as her budget. So,
wow.
And this is 1984, 85. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
She complains because she thinks he's making actually $100,000 a month. So she should be getting $50,000. In Betty math, it's $50,000. And Dan's like, no, because right. So Betty's always asking for more money. She always feels like he's being chintzy with her with the money. And then
and there's there's an argument to be made that like he is making the kind of money he's making because of the domestic labor that she did to help him get there, and that's a huge amount of work, which is why he's had to outsource it to other people to keep doing it without her. I don't really know how much he was making. $9,000 is a lot of money.
I wouldn't be mad at it, but that would be fine by me. But she's saying, well, he's making 10 times that amount, so she wants more. So she's whatever
she wants half.
She wants half. She truly wants half. And he's saying, well, now that I have the kids to take care of, I need more money. There's arguments to be made.
Yeah,
on both. Betty starts dating a guy. She's finding out, and this is what happens. You've been through a divorce. When you split up, the friends split up. The friends have to choose. Who am I going to partner with? And sometimes folks just they break up and it's fine. They don't leave that for everybody else to manage. So there's no weirdness. That's not what's happening here. You're either on Betty's side or on Dan's side. And if you're on Dan's side, you love Linda and you accept Linda and you don't take any, and Betty is a psycho. And that's the only narrative you're allowed to believe in.
Yep.
And for Betty, if you want to be on Betty's side, Dan's a monster, Dan's an asshole, and Linda's a C word. And she's a bimbo and a C word. So you're just, you have to choose who you're going to be with.
Yes. And we can all pretend that that's bananas, but it's actually super normal.
I think it's normal too.
It's super normal.
Yeah, but it is though. When people split up, you do have to kind of, very rarely do people split up and it's like totally, it doesn't have any weirdness to your friendship relations and your families.
Yeah, no,
and
it's
stuff.
That's an outlier. I feel like it's super common for people to pick a side.
Yeah.
And nobody, very rarely do people they split up and like the husband or the wife is like, my ex-wife is an angel. She was perfect. Blah, blah. Like it doesn't usually work that way.
No.
So yeah, they're going to paint their stories.
Right.
They're going to read their stories.
So Dan and Linda are living in this very fine house in La Jolla. It's a home that Margot lives near, and she took a picture of, and she said that it's in a historic neighborhood, so you can't change it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's beautiful, and if you look up I'll put the address in the show notes. Like if you look it up, they have a pool, they have this gorgeous brick exterior, a lot of land.
Southern California homes are gorgeous.
They are insanely gorgeous.
A lot of them have pools,
and they're near the water, and they have pools.
Yeah.
So that's Dan and Linda. They're living in the house that she wants to be in. And Betty has to live someplace else. And Betty now wants the kids back, but the kids don't want to be with her because all Betty does is talk about Dan. Like
Right.
Dan will talk about anything other than Betty. Like that he doesn't want to talk about it at all. That's all she wants to talk about. So that's another dynamic that people have to try to manage. And Dan's family has to like understand. Like Dan now has a new girlfriend, and it's
Yeah.
weird for everybody.
It's
But-
super weird.
But Betty is getting angrier and angrier about everything. You know, she feels like he's not telling her enough. She feels like he's just replaced her. She feels replaced and discarded.
Yeah.
And she feels like, here I gave this, once again, I gave him my best years. I could have been married to anybody. I married you. I helped you, gain your, because being in also the social settings, the socialites, that was big for Dan. That was very important to him. And she knew exactly what that was like because she grew up at country clubs. So she knew it.
Right.
So they were a partnership. But it's just like, like Jacoby and Myers, they don't always work out. Like it's like sometimes people just split up. And it takes a while to gain some, wisdom about it.
Yeah.
But when you're going
there's
through it, you're hurt.
so much hurt and so much anger.
Yes.
Like, so much anger. I can really, I get it. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, I don't know where to put this.
Right. Because you feel like you were lied to. You feel like you were discarded. You feel like it was also what you gave wasn't appreciated. It's considered, nothing compared to what he did. And it's like, there's no way this man wasn't going to get through law school without her. She paid the bills, the rent, the food. She worked 3 or 4 jobs sometimes. She was babysitting while she had 3 little kids with her. She'd go to people's homes and babysit. Like every amount of change, she brought that in. She introduced him to all the people. She helped him create an image with the Armani suits and stuff like that. But she turned him into Dapper Dan. That's what she said. It's like she made him who he was. So she's like, you owe me half of everything from now on. And he's saying, yeah, that was great, but I'm going to give you 10% of that for now on. And so you'll figure out what you want to do with your life. And it's like, hi, I'm 45. I have 4 kids. I've never had a job, except at the Black Angus. What am I going to do that's going to make any kind of money?
That would be frustrating. And
I get her
have
anger.
that kind of, and it's like, she feels hurt.
Yeah.
She probably wants him to hurt. Right?
Absolutely.
And she's super angry. Like it's very normal. What happens later is not normal.
No, and then she goes really into Looney Tunes. So she starts. Betty cannot let things go, and she's starting to lose friends because her friends are starting to get like, dude.
Oh my God, have we all had that friend? Like you're like, stop talking about him.
Yes, I've been that friend. I've been that. That's not a fun conversation because nobody ever wants to hear that. Then nobody wants to hear that they're annoying. No one wants to be annoying, right? Nobody wants to think they are.
No, of course not.
You don't want to feel like you're a drain on people. Nobody likes that. Betty doesn't care. She's just gonna. That's the thing about narcissists. They care only about themselves. Their emotions are the most important emotions to take care of. So she's super mad at Dan. So she's always asking him for money. She gets it raised up to $16,000 a month. Not happy because she wanted $25,000. I know, $1,985, y'all.
That's so much. That feels like so much money to me.
To me too. And then on top of that, Betty and Dan, their arguing is getting intense because they're mad about different things, but it all comes down to money. He's got all the money. He's giving her a check every month. So Betty's doing things that she shouldn't be doing, like calling Dan's house and leaving vulgar messages on their answering machine over and over and over again, driving by his office and giving him the finger, calling his old friends and telling them stories about Dan.
Oh my God.
She's upsetting her kids. She can't talk to them about anything other than their horrible dad.
Yeah.
And they're like, this is a really bad position you're putting me in because I get why you're mad, but I love him. He's my dad. We just want you guys to get along. How can we do this? And she's just not computing. So then Dan gets and also what she's doing is she is stealing the keys from her kids to go into his house. And so she's going into his house when he and Linda aren't there, and she's ripping up his clothes. They had like a Boston cream pie in the fridge. She took it out and threw it on their bed and spread it all over their stuff. Like, girl, that's some good eating there. Boston cream pie, you don't waste that.
What do you do? Girl, just short sheet their bed.
Exactly.
And spit in their pie and move on.
Make a shit pie and move on. Like the help. But she can't. She cannot stop herself. And so the kids are begging her. So then they're all staying with Dan now, and they're all doing reduced time. So now that he's going to court, he's going to get the kids. He's going to be responsible for the kids. She's not even going to get visitation because she's so bad. So Dan starts instilling these rules, and he says, every time you use a curse word, I'm going to charge you $200. Every time you leave me a vulgar voicemail, I'm going to charge you $400 or $500. Every time you come into my home uninvited, I'm going to charge you $1,000. And Betty was like, challenge accepted. You want to find me for my shit? I'm going to do some shit. I'm going to do it crazy.
Oh, my goodness.
So she's leaving vulgar voicemails, like long time. She's sending them notes. She's telling her kids. She's telling everybody in town. She's breaking into their home and destroying shit, like over and over again. She's doing this. So bad that one month Dan said, you actually owe me money this month because you've spent all of it on all these fines.
That wasn't money well spent.
No.
Maybe she thought it was at the time, but
nothing's making her happy. And then at one point they have to sell the house that they originally had together. And the whole thing was like, we're going to sell the house. We'll sell it. She wants $360,000. The top bid they can get for is $325,000. Isn't that quaint? A home in California for $300,000, like with 5 bedrooms and stuff. Right. But she's saying no. And he's like, well, how much? She will not. She says, well, I want $1 million. If somebody doesn't give us $1 million for this house, then I'm not going to say it's okay. She's fighting him about all these things. Dan is a lawyer. He knows every judge in San Diego. He knows every court reporter. He knows all the PR firms that handle these legal agencies. He knows everybody. So he starts getting the word around about Betty, that she's a cuckoo and and she's unstable. That's getting back to her. And it's making her even more angry and more upset. And I feel terrible. Like her one son was only 10 years old, and he called his mother, and Dan was recording the conversations, and he said to her, look, Mom, you got to stop using the bad words. Please stop using those bad words. It's just getting you in trouble. And then I can't see you because then they don't feel safe to send me to you. So could you please not do that? She goes, well, is that your dad talking to you, or is that the C word talking to you? And she would use the C word to her 10-year-old. Right?
I, again, understand the anger, but you can't hold on to it forever. All it does is hurt you and those kids.
She's not learning.
And those kids.
And the kids. And the kids are completely. And he's having an issue with Kimberly. She's got some issues. Lee has some big issues with drugs because it's an unstable environment. There's just nothing, so everyone's kind of. And this is how intense Dan was. Not only was he filing, and he was constantly like sending papers to the wife, like, oh, you cursed on this day and you went to the house on that day and blah, blah, blah. This is what he's all about the retribution. He says to his daughter, who has a drug problem, you either stop dating this guy and stop using drugs, or I'm going to kick you out. He winds up kicking her out, and he takes her out of his will. She's 19 years old.
Again, you make mistakes when you're that age.
Of course you do.
Wow.
But he's real about punishment. Like he doesn't play around. Like he uses what.
Right.
So Lee is not there, but Daniel and Rhett, who are 2 other sons, they're all trying to make this work, but Betty is really like just nothing's going to make her happy.
Right.
And nobody can sit her down and just be like, he doesn't want you anymore. So now you have to come up with a new reality and then move forward. You're not going to get anywhere till you do. And she just doesn't want to hear that. So Dan and Linda get married in April of 1989. And it was 2 weeks after the 20th anniversary from his first marriage, which was also in April.
Dude, move to a totally different season.
I mean, right?
At least move to a different season.
Make it a summer wedding. Why are you even? But they did.
Just okay.
So they're getting married at the house. It's 1989. And Linda says, I want you to wear a bulletproof vest because they're so worried. Because Betty is also.
Wow.
Also, Betty got herself a .38 and was going to the shooting range. because she said she felt, now that I live alone and nobody's here with me, I might get robbed or something. So I need to have a gun for protection. And she was going to the gun range and she was telling people, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. He's going to get me on the wrong day and I'm going to kill him. She leaves it on his voicemail. I should shoot you right now.
It's so awful.
She's just like constantly threatening to shoot him. She tells it to the kids. Her kids.
I can't imagine like being on the outside of this, like a friend of hers and just wanting to shake the shit out of her.
She says that Linda was torturing her and Linda was sending because also Betty at one point gained 60 pounds and that also added to her being upset, and
right.
Shit happens.
That was his fault too, I'm sure. Like,
oh yeah,
look how much you upset me.
I've
gained all this me out. Yeah.
So she swears that Linda sent her things in the mail that were about weight loss or skin products, and she swears that Linda sent her a note like, "You ugly bitch, I got him now," which I don't picture at all. Like, I don't know. I don't know why I just don't buy it. I'm just not buying it.
Yeah. Well, does she have that note?
No.
Okay.
But she swears it's Linda. Linda's doing this and this to me. So they get married in April at the house, and he doesn't wear a bulletproof vest, but he gets security guards at the front door. Betty had broken into their house and stolen their guest list for their wedding and went through and phoned every single person that was going to the wedding, except for Dan's family, to say, why are you going to this thing? Are you choosing their side? Why are you doing this? And some of them are because they work with Dan and Dan's the lawyer and that's his new wife. Like,
yeah,
people make choices. She went through and she called all these people. So that was in April of 1989. The summer comes around. She's getting more and more upset. She's not leaving them alone. And they do get married. They do get a divorce. And by the way, Betty is going through lawyers like people go through toilet paper. Like she cannot get a lawyer because she's convinced that they all work for Dan.
Right.
And so all of her friends are like, fine, go to LA and find an attorney.
Yes.
Or ask somebody. But she hires someone and then she fires them. And she's just constantly. And so she even said.
Probably because they're not doing what she wants because what she wants is bananas.
Well, she says, I'm not going to sell that house for less than $1 million. And there's like, well, it's not worth $1 million. So you're not going to get $1 million. So they need to sell the house. So you need to be okay with it. And she was going to get more money from it. So Dan went to court and he figured out a way to sell the house without her permission. Mm-hmm. And they just did it. He also went to court and figured out how to get a divorce without her showing up in court. But she thought if I don't show up in court and I don't have a lawyer, I'll just keep this going forever because it's going to be right. And no,
he'll still be tied to me. And yeah.
But he gets a divorce from her. Yeah. So he and Linda are now ready to start their own family. Their home is at 1041 Cypress Avenue in Marston Hills neighborhood, which is the fancy near Balboa Park. So on the night of November 5th, 1989, the 9th, it was 5:30 in the morning, Betty had taken from her daughter Kim the key to their house. These people need better security. She goes into their home at 5:30 and she brings the gun with her. And she said, I was going to go there and I was going to talk to him and then I was going to shoot myself. That was her whole plan, she said. But she goes there and instead she shoots 5 times at the two of them. And Linda's killed instantly. Dan was killed and was hit in the chest and was trying to reach for the wall, for the phone that was near the wall. And Betty whacked his hand with the gun and then took the phone out of the wall and took it with her. So Dan suffered a bit before he died.
Yeah. Do you believe that that her plan was to argue with him and then kill herself?
Maybe. I mean, maybe in one of her dreams, in a fugue state, she was saying that.
Yeah.
And she had attempted suicide before a couple of times when she had arguments with Dan. One time she said she was using a knife on her skin, to cut herself. But he had this training from going to med school and he was like, they're not very deep. It's not like she was really
Well, some
And
people do it for there's attention cutting.
yes.
Like,
So she did that and took a bottle of pills, but the pills were like aspirin. They weren't like anything really
right,
dangerous. So it made her sick, but it didn't kill her.
right.
But she said she had made attempts before, but that's was her whole thing was that she was going to, that was the whole reason she was going to do that. So she shoots them and they're dead. And it's like 5:30 in the morning. And she calls her daughter Lee, who's now moved out and living with her boyfriend, and said, I shot the son of a bitch. And her daughter's like, come on over, Mom. We'll talk this out.
Are the other kids there?
She's living with her boyfriend. Lee is living with a boyfriend, so she calls the sister Kim. I don't know about the younger brothers because they might have been too young for her. But the older sisters, they're talking with the mother, and they're like, "Well, we got to call the police, and we
Mhm.
have to get ahead of this." Dan and Linda are buried at Greenwood Memorial Park together. So there is a case. The first trial takes place in 1990. And Betty's on the stand and it's on court TV. So it's hours and hours of testimony with Betty. And it's a lot of like, Dan and Linda aren't there to defend themselves. She is.
Yeah.
And she's allowed to have a vigorous defense. So
Yeah.
a lot of her defense is crapping over the two of them, their reputations.
Yeah, and who's at home watching court TV during the day? A lot of other
Yes.
stay-at-home mom types, so I'm sure there was a lot of empathy there.
I absolutely.
Not saying that stay-at-home moms wanna murder their husband. I'm saying, like,
I
there's
get
probably
it, though.
a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I've been that mad.
Uh,
Oh, I've been that," or
You
that
should look
sort
at
of
my
thing.
TikTok stories. I swear to God, people are like, I don't say what she did. I don't condone what she's doing, but my ex used to do this to me and it made me crazy.
Yeah.
So the first trial ends with a hung jury where 10 people wanted to convict her, but 2 people said no. So then San Diego had to decide, do we put in another trial because they're very expensive?
Mhm.
If we do this again and it doesn't work, she's just going to go free again, but they decide to go for it. So this time they have the trial and the first movie had come out. So Meredith Baxter's filming this movie like as they're doing the trial. And when it was over, and it's a really great movie, a lot of people talk about it. Like the woman scoring was really good, but she felt later on that she was too sympathetic to Betty. She felt she was too much into the pocket for that. And she felt
and
like
they filmed it so early.
right.
Kinda like our Billionaires Boys Club episode
Right.
last week. Yeah.
Yeah, they filmed it so early. So they get the second trial going. And that's when Betty really kind of is feeling herself. So it's been a while. She's in jail. She kind of like has her fan club at the jail. She gets 200 letters a week. She's allowed to go on television as much as she wants. Nobody tells her she can't.
Wow.
So she's constantly on television doing interviews. She's out there. And people are starting to forget about Dan and Linda. And so when they do the next movie's about the second trial. And in the second trial, the DA, Carrie Wells, who became a Supreme Court judge eventually, she Broderick was using the defense of a battered wife. And in the second trial, she said, he beat me, he was emotionally abusive. That's where I'm coming from.
Right.
And it's what she's saying, but there's no witnesses. And he's dead. Nobody can ask Dan.
Yeah, there's no police reports. The kids didn't see anything like that.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's tough.
So it's
How do you prove that?
How do you prove that? Right. So she can't prove that. So then the DA, Linda Wells, Carrie Wells, excuse me, she was very much very focused this time. Like, we really need to bring Dan and Linda into that courtroom and have people understand like what happened. So this time the jury does convict, and it's for second degree murder. Murder in the first degree is when you plan it. Second is when you do it, but you weren't planning on doing it. I mean, she showed up with a gun. She was going to shoot somebody, but okay.
Right.
She gets 32 years. She gets consecutive sentences, so they're not served concurrently.
Mm-hmm.
This was in 1991 that the second trial happened. She's been in jail since then. She has not been let out. She's up for parole when she's 84. That's the next time she's up for parole. She's been up for parole a few times. She never says she's sorry. She has absolutely no regrets about what she did.
I was just going to say she's not sorry.
She doesn't say sorry. She doesn't look at it and think, that was 30 years ago. I was a different person. I would do things very differently now.
Right.
I've really, you got to be like Red in Shawshank Redemption. Like, you got to kind of just like, I don't know that kid. I would talk to him. I'd strangle him.
Right.
I'd shake his shoulders. Like, no, you got to get your shit together. Betty hasn't done that. Betty is just the way she was back then.
Wow.
She had every right to do that. She was protecting herself. So she's never been out. Once again, she does interviews. Her kids visit her. And it's sad to say, but like half of them don't want her to get out at all. And half of them are like, she already served her time. She can live with me. And that's where we stand now. The kids are all close with each other. There was a weirdness because, like I said, Lee was taken out of her father's will. I think if he'd known he was going to be murdered like a few months later, that maybe he wouldn't have done that. But I don't know like if they split it up differently, but they're all alive. They're all doing as best as they can. All the kids I'm talking about now. Some of them live in Idaho. Most of them gotten married and had their own families. I mean, they're older than their father was when he died now.
Yeah.
That's something to really think about.
I don't even know how you navigate that situation in life when one parent murders the other like that. And so you've lost a parent, and then the other parent did this because of something that one parent, like, I can't even imagine.
I can't either. And yeah, I mean, I just like, they had to grow up after that, and the boys were younger, so the girls were older. They're like 18, 19 years old. They're not like grown-ups,
Right.
but they're young adults, so they had to figure it out for themselves.
They're so young.
But the boys lived for a while with Dan's brother's family in Colorado, and they lived with family friends for a while. As I said, they all, most of them have gotten married and had kids. Half of them are like, I think she needs to stay there. She hasn't repented anything. She feels bad about nothing. She totally justifies everything she's done. And the other two are like, yeah, but she's not going to hurt anybody now. She can live with me. We live in Idaho. We live in this remote place. She can live with us. We'll take it over. We'll take care of her.
Interesting.
But that's where we are. That's the case of Betty Broderick. And it's fascinating to watch people talk about her and the discussions about her. And some people immediately are like, Dan was abusive. Dan was terrible. And Dan's not here to defend himself, but he very well could have been. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
he has a harsh side
here.
Yeah, he has a very harsh side to him, that he demonstrated in court, but I'm sure he demonstrated that in life as well. Like I said, it's one of his daughters. He took her out of her will. I'm like, she's only 19, dude. Like, give her a chance to figure her shit out.
To clean up.
Yeah, she's been through some shit. Like, put her in rehab or something. Like, right. But look, he didn't. And I felt bad. Betty was on the Oprah show, and it was in between the trials, the first one and the second one. And Betty, like, Oprah even asked her, like, you talk about Linda so disparagingly. Like, don't you understand she has a family? And she's like, I don't care. She was nothing. She was a bimbo. She was nothing. And Linda's sister was in the audience.
Wow.
And could hear, like, and Betty was like on a remote or something, but like Linda was in the audience at Oprah and had to hear this. Her sister was in the audience. I had to hear this shit. And a couple of people in the audience actually reached out to her. Like, I have a sister too. I want you to know I really feel bad for you. This is a terrible situation. I mean, she doesn't even have enough compassion to be like, I could be really mad at a person, but if you told me like their family would hear it, I wouldn't say it.
Well, and like, this is, again, this is on Dan.
Yeah.
It's having some anger towards Linda is sure.
Yeah.
Like there's like a jealousy and to be angry and things like that. But to say that she deserved to die for it and like not having remorse, or also Linda was younger.
Right.
Like, I mean, damn, that's some cold-hearted shit.
Yeah.
You did a really good job on
Oh,
this.
thank you.
It's a good one. This is a good one.
It's got a lot to discuss. There's a lot to chew
Yeah,
on.
as someone who's lived through a divorce, I
Yeah.
certainly understand where I didn't have this kind of anger, but like,
But you get
yeah,
angry, sure.
but you get angry and hurtful and like you want to hurt them because they hurt you, and
Right.
but at a certain point you have to let that stuff go and you have to put your kids first, and
And
it sounds like she just
she
was
couldn't do it.
incapable. Yeah.
And she
And
had
that's
friends that tried to tell her, like, Betty, you're rich. You get 16K coming every month. Like, you got a younger boyfriend. She had a boyfriend. She had somebody to like, you got a boyfriend. You're rich. You're pretty. Just have fun. Just look at this as like
Yep.
you're a free pass to do another part of your life. It's like there's certain ways to look at it, but
Yeah.
she wouldn't do that. Like, she was so angry and just so pissed off that she didn't get the life she thought she deserved.
Right.
So that's our creep.
Well, good job, my friend.
Thank you.
Want to hear about someone who's not a creep?
I do.
Okay. Well, you've mentioned already Meredith Baxter played Betty Broderick in 2 TV movies, and I thought she would be a good one to talk about. She was nominated for an Emmy Award for playing Betty
At
Broderick,
least-
and I believe
Oh,
I
no.
believe it's the what?
I thought you were talking about Family Ties. She played Elise on Family Ties.
Yeah, no, she was nominated for that too, but she was nominated for an Emmy for playing Betty Broderick in the A Woman Scorned, which I think is the second TV movie in the
Let me
of the
look that up.
2. Because this is the one that came out in 92. So I think that's the second.
A Woman Scored was 1992. That was a Betty Broderick story. And then a year
Yeah.
later, it was less than
okay.
a year. It was 92. And then the sequel came out just like a few months later. Her Final Fury.
Okay, so it's the first one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her Final
There you
Fury,
go.
Betty Broderick, the last chapter.
Oh, all right. So she was nominated for that. But Meredith Baxter was born June 21st, 1947 in South Pasadena, California. She's actually a daughter of an actress, director, and a producer named Whitney Blake. She did 4 seasons on a show called Hazel from the 60s. And then she was the co-creator and writer of One Day at a Time.
What?
I didn't know that.
That was her
I
mother?
learned something. Yes.
I
her
loved One Day at a
father-
Time.
I love One Day
Oh, it
at a
was
Time.
the
I used to watch it all
best.
the time.
When Julie and her
her-
boyfriend took off in the van. Remember that? When
Yep.
Julie took off and she ran away? And
Yes.
then her mom was like, fine, Julie, stay with him. Don't come home.
Yep.
Oh, so
That was a
good.
good show. It was a good show.
Mackenzie Phillips is
Um,
amazing.
And her father was Tom Baxter, a radio announcer. She got into acting after high school, and she, made an appearance on Laugh-In, and then she would do shows like the Doris Day Show and the show called the Young Lawyers. She was on an episode of The Partridge Family.
Great show.
And then in 72, she does this CBS sitcom called Bridget Loves Bernie. And it was like a story of like a Catholic girl who falls in love with a Jewish guy. And the co-star was David Burney. And they actually like fell in love. They got married. So for a while she was Meredith Baxter Burney. So a lot of people who watch her on Family Ties will probably know her as that. They divorced in 89, and then she dropped that.
Much like Dan and Betty, 89, and
Yep.
she was born in 47. That was Betty's birth year.
Yep.
Hello.
Some good casting. She was also, I just wanted to say, she was also in All the President's Men, and she also did a show called Family in 1976.
I loved Family.
Yeah, and then she joined Family Ties, which was in 82. The whole idea of like the former like hippies with like
Conservative
Alex
kids.
Keaton as those conservative kids. I think that's what most people know her from. She also did a TV movie. While I was researching this, I discovered she did a TV movie called My Breast from 1994, and it's directed by Betty Thomas, and it's about a woman who was a writer for People magazine named Joyce Wadler, and she discovers that she has breast cancer, and she's in this like relationship with this guy played by Jamie Sheridan.
Yeah.
Do you remember that actor? Yeah, so that's the boyfriend in the movie.
Oh, in
and
the
like,
movie, not in life.
in the movie. Yeah, no, in the movie. And he's like a totally shitty boyfriend. She's diagnosed with cancer, and like all of her friends and family are like rallying around her. And he's like, huh, what's going on? He's super shitty. And like through that diagnosis and like the support of her friends, she kind of gets rid of this shitty relationship and finds her true path or whatever. And I was like, I might want to watch that. So I like wrote it down.
What is the one with the eating disorders? Kate's Secret?
Oh, yes, Kate's Secret.
That's one
Yep.
where she was
She
a
has
woman.
bulimia.
She's bulimia and she's in the hospital, and it's known because Ed Asner is in the movie. He's like the doctor in charge of the hospital. At one point, he yells out loud, "We gotta find her! She's going to purge!" She was like running to a bathroom like really fast. These TV movies with their diseases of the weeks, they were amazing. They were so amazing.
And by the way, when Margot says that, they were literally called that. They were called like the disease of the week movie.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that was the thing that people would call them. So she did that one. She actually received a special award from the National Breast Cancer Coalition for doing that movie. And she was actually diagnosed with breast cancer in 1999.
Oh, wow. That's right.
And she got treatment. She's made a full recovery. She launched like a skincare line called like Meredith Baxter Simple Works, and all the money goes to breast cancer research. That's what it's. And so she started a Meredith Baxter Foundation for breast cancer research. You know, she raises money for that, and through that, like the money goes towards research for it.
Mm-hmm.
She's also a big advocate for gun control, which we love here. We love a gun control queen. She's a member of the board of the Center to Prevent Handgun Violence. I have to wonder if her playing the role of Betty Broderick had something to do with that.
I wonder too, yeah.
Yeah, she's been very supportive, outspoken of things like the Brady Bill when that was happening and the National Crime Bill. In 2011, she published her memoir, called Untied. And that's where she talked about like she, had really unhappy marriages. She's been married 4 times, and 3 of those times were not so great. She said that she was in abusive marriages. She struggled with alcoholism. She's sober now. And then later in life, realizing that she was gay. Her book did really well. It was a national.
Did she marry that woman? Is she married?
Yes.
Now? Yeah.
So I read there's a very sweet story in the New York Times about like where they write about weddings and stuff. And so they wrote about her wedding, and they wrote about how they met. And Meredith was already sober at the time, and her now wife, Nancy Locke, was like trying to get sober. And so Nancy's friend was like, you should call Meredith and like, you guys should just talk on the phone. Like, she can help.
Yeah.
She didn't know she was Meredith Baxter. She just knew her as Meredith. And they didn't meet in person for like a long time. They were just talking on the phone, and she was like helping her like stay sober and like kind of being like a sponsor without not being officially a sponsor.
Right. But just a good sober friend.
Yeah. And then they like eventually like met for coffee, and like she's like, oh shit, you're like
boing.
Yeah, and like the relationship like progressed from there, and like they got married. They met, I want to say they met in 2007 or something like that. They got married in 2013. A really sweet article in the New York Times about their relationship. And then there's this really cute photo of like Michael Gross, who played her husband on Family Ties, is there like giving a toast at her wedding.
Aww.
And there's like all these, she has a total of 5 children, and they were at the wedding, and they're just saying like how when she met Nancy, like their mom just became this like
Oh,
really friendly, outgoing, like she just like
she
kinda
sparkled, and
yes, exactly, like, and
you find
she just
someone who
seems
compliments you in a good
yes,
way.
in a
That's not
good
just the
way, in a
opposite of
good
you. That's
way.
different. But somebody who just
Yes.
compliments you is different than somebody who's the opposite of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah,
there you
yeah, yeah, yeah.
go. So, that is our non-creep, Meredith Baxter.
I remember she was interviewed on KFOG when that was the thing, RIP to that the greatest radio
Oh,
station ever.
K-Fog. I loved
Oh,
K-Fog.
I love the morning show, Dave Morey. So she was on the morning show and they were asking her about, her big lesbian life and what she was doing and
Big lesbian.
and in between they were playing music, in between her interviews, and they played Adele,
Mhm.
Rolling in the Deep. Remember that first
Yeah.
song from her?
Yeah, yeah.
And Meredith gets on the show and was like freaking out. She goes, "Who is this?" I'm like, "Oh, it's Adele." She goes, "I'd never heard this before. It's amazing." I love watching people react to things and like get excited. That's like a fetish of mine. Like I just really
Yeah.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah, she seems like a good one.
Oh,
I'm
she's
like,
great.
I'm glad to hear that she's sober and happy and found her
cancer
person
free and found her person
cancer.
and
Yeah.
looks great.
Yeah. We
Good
love
for
that
her.
for her.
We love that for her. All right. Well, if you like the sound of our voices, and by golly, why wouldn't you at this point?
Right?
We also co-host a show called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies. We recently just covered Hoosiers because of
Yes.
Gene Hackman. We both
Alright.
loved. We loved the movie. What are we covering this week, Sonia?
Speaking of addiction, we are going to cover Postcards from the Edge with Meryl Streep and Shirley MacLaine. Gene Hackman's in that one too, actually.
Oh, he is. That's right. He's the director.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I saw this movie a lot when it was at the theater. It played at my movie theater, so I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. So listen for that one.
That's coming up. We're always looking for suggestions for creeps and non-creeps. So all those places I mentioned at the top of the show, reach out to us. We love it when you use the Annie Potts gift. We got one from Ghostbusters, or just be clever, do something on your own. Our email, once again, is whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like some stickers, please send your address to there. I'm supposed to get them any day now. I've been waiting for my next batch, but I'd love to get them out to you guys. Sonia,
I feel like things have been a little slow.
I think like
mail-wise.
the whole world is just like crawling to a crawl.
Yeah, things
It's
are a
just
little
like everything
banana,
is just
right.
like
Everything's
it's turning.
banana.
It's bananas. Everything sucks. Everything's whatever. So anyway, Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on Blue Sky and Threads and Instagram and TikTok. Where can people find you, my friend?
You can find me at brooklynfitchick.com. I'm at brooklynfitchick for Threads and Instagram, and I'm at Brooklyn Margot for TikTok and for Blue Sky.
Yeah.
And my YouTube channel is at my name, Margot Donahue, and I have a book coming out in August, and I'm posting a lot of clips there.
Yay!
So please sign up for that. That would be amazing. That'd be rad.
It would be rad. It would be dope.
Using all these expressions from the 80s. It was gnarly. It'd be so gnarly if you could do that, please. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with a new episode. In the meantime, be safe. Be kind. Just don't be a creep.
Don't be a creep. Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.